Welcome to the Falling Walls Circles table, part of Falling Walls 2020, where we will give the spotlight to world-leading scientists, science strategists, and policy makers from academia, business, and politics who will discuss how we can apply science, research, and innovation to get the world moving again. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juliana Chan, and I am the CEO and publisher of the Singapore headquartered Asian Scientist magazine. In today's Falling Walls Circles table discussion on COVID-19, current trends in vaccine research, we will hear from three industry and academic experts on approaches to overcome the scientific, technical, economic, and regulatory challenges for the safe and rapid development of a vaccine. So we know that the COVID pandemic can only be brought about by breakthroughs in research and innovation. These include three pillars of medical intervention: diagnosis, therapy, and vaccination. So, diagnosis based on RNA measurements is already well established and broadly used, while serum antibody tests are being validated and will soon become widely available. So, we also have treatments, and some have been repurposed from existing indications such as dexamethasone, remdesivir, etc. Now, as for vaccines, many of them have entered late stage clinical trials, and we are looking forward with great anticipation. Global access to vaccines will now face a new issue, that of supply in large numbers. We are talking the order of hundreds of millions of doses, and also the affordability and access to them. So, how can we overcome these challenges? And how can we ensure access to these very life saving vaccines? Here to help us understand these issues are three panel experts. First, we have Renee Faber, Head of Bioprocess Solutions Division at Sartorius. Hi, Renee. Nice to have you here today.
Hi, Juliana.
So Renee is a chemist by training. He earned his PhD in polymer chemistry at the Technical University of Munich in Germany. Next, we have on his right, Uwe Gottschalk. I hope I pronounced it right now. Uwe.
Perfect.
Nice to meet you.
Juliana, thanks.
Who was the Chief Scientific Officer of Lonza, where he has been since 2017. And he actually is also a senior lecturer at the University of Duisburg-Essen. So he has some academic interests as well, it turns out. And last but not least, we have Carlos Guzman, furthest to the right, who is the head of the Department of Vaccinology and Applied Microbiology at the Helmholtz Center for Infection Research. How are you, Carlos?
Thank you
Nice
very
to
much.
have you here.
It's a pleasure to be with you and the rest of the audience.
So we have an expert in infectious disease with us here today. Carlos has been active in vaccinology since 1989, and his work led to the discovery of new adjuvants, the establishment of Salmonella species as a delivery system for DNA vaccines and therapeutic molecules. So we are quite excited to hear from him about the latest developments in, of course, COVID vaccine research and various activities taking place at HZI. So without further ado, I'm just going to invite all of my three speakers today to maybe briefly describe the important role of your company and, of course, your institute in the vaccine race. Perhaps we could start with Renee on Sartorius.
Thank you, Juliana. Happy to talk about that. So we at Sartorius, actually, we are supplier of tools which are used to develop or manufacture drugs or vaccines. So we have been involved in the coronavirus vaccine development almost with all major players so far. Starting in the lab when researchers develop drug or vaccine, they use our tools in the lab to get to the right candidate, vaccine candidate or drug candidate as fast as possible, or maybe also sort out the candidates which are not appropriate early in the process. And then when the candidate has been identified, or candidates have been identified, we support companies who then build the manufacturing processes, develop manufacturing processes, and manufacture such drugs or vaccine at the industrial scale as well.
All right, thank you, Renee. And before we move on to Uwe, I just want to encourage the audience who are here with us today to send us any questions that you may have in the Q&A chat as part of this live broadcast, because I will be taking questions from the audience later on in the segment, and I will be asking them to our panelists. Just a little bit of a reminder. But now on to Uwe. Please share with us what is the role of Lonza in this COVID pandemic response.
Yeah, first of all, Juliana, it's important to understand that we are not pharma. Lonza is the largest contract development and manufacturing organization, but we don't have our own brands. And since we all entered uncharted territories when this pandemic hit us, we had to, like all others, react to it and put together an emergency plan. And the emergency focus right from the beginning was to protect our people, their families, and keep supply security for the pharmaceuticals that we are making. So business continuity was a very big focus, because we make drugs for our customers and for patients. And this goes, of course, beyond COVID-19. And we could not afford to let anybody down during this challenging time in spring. And as we experience now, this is continuing. In addition, of course, we have also set up a COVID-19 task force that qualifies and prioritizes the hundreds of customers' requests that we are currently receiving. And among the collaborations that we have started around therapeutics to treat COVID-19 and also vaccines, there are a few published ones. The biggest one with Moderna, of course. We entered an exclusive global supply agreement with Moderna to make their mRNA vaccine. And recently, I think yesterday, you found in the news that we are also making a panel of virus, of anti-coronavirus, neutralizing coronavirus antibodies for AstraZeneca. And it's very interesting to note also that classical CMOs hardly worked in the vaccine space so far. And this has now changed dramatically due to the global capacity shortage that everybody is witnessing.
Well, thank you for sharing with us, and looking forward to what happens with these late-stage clinical trials, certainly. Last but not least, Carlos, please tell us, what is HZI doing in the response to COVID-19?
Okay, Juliana, it's a pleasure to tell you a bit about what we are doing at the moment. When start the pandemic, our organization is rather flexible, so we can redesign and redeploy our capacity in different areas of COVID research. This was, of course, facilitated by the fact that we have, for example, a 150 square meter lab BSL-3 containment with everything from robotic up to imaging. And we have animal facility where we can go again up to BSL-3 containment experiments. We were working, for example, in the area of epidemiology. We have an application, is a system that is called SORMANS, that means Surveillance Outbreak Response Management Analysis System, that allow, in principle, to integrate all the players in real time that are needed in order to fight against a pandemic. And this was already running in a couple of African countries, in Ghana, in Nigeria, for other potential outbreak like monkeypox, Ebola, and we designed the blocks for COVID, and at the moment is operative or is being rolled out in France, in Switzerland, in 50 health departments in Germany, and also in very remote places from Germany like Nepal or Fiji. We were also very active in the area of mathematical modeling, supporting different aspects that are COVID relevant. 1/3 of our intramural activities are geared toward anti-infective. So we have everything from the initial screening, going through medicinal chemistry, up to preclinical testing. And this, of course, is used or exploited at the moment in the context of COVID-related projects. Coming more close to home, to the area of vaccinology, we were in the context of private-public partnerships, supporting with our technologies the screening of therapeutic antibodies. And I think that it's very important to take into account that therapeutic antibodies can be exploited not only for the therapy of COVID, but they can find their use in the context of passive vaccination. That means that I can inject individuals that are at high risk for infection. I can protect for several months. This is something that is at the moment looked for by big and intermediate players like Regeneron or Glaxo, and we need to consider also as like a vaccination. Concerning more conventional vaccines, we are part of an infrastructure that is funded by the European Commission, TransVac2, that have different modules that are supporting the whole pipeline of vaccine research and development. And in the context of TransVac, we are offering to groups operating in the academia and in the biotech industry support for preclinical testing of vaccine candidates. Last but not least, we have our own activities. Our own activities are not too much focused in today, but in the next generation vaccine that might be needed downstream. For example, we are looking at in silico approaches that we were exploiting in the context of GATE-funded project in order to develop synthetic genes that can allow us to protect against past, current, and foreseeable emerging beta coronaviruses. We are also looking at something that at the moment is underrepresented in the pipeline of vaccine development, that is mucosal vaccine. Mucosal vaccine that might be able to promote very strong tissue-resident memory responses in the lungs, aiming not only at protecting against disease, but also interfering to some extent with this horizontal transmission of the pathogen that is, of course, an issue in pandemics.
Well, Carlos, that sounds like a very wide variety of activities going on, and that's probably the reason many scientists like to stay in academia, because you get to see a bird's eye view of so many kinds of research taking place. So thanks for everyone for sharing with me what you're doing right now. Now, if I could just take all of you back to the cusp of the COVID-19 pandemic, this was perhaps early January, maybe mid-February. Could you remember what your company was doing, and how did it pivot or ramp up its research and development just to tackle COVID-19 head-on? So maybe I'll start with Renee again. Do you remember what Sartorius was up to in the first quarter of this year, and how things have changed dramatically since then? I would love to hear from you, the inside story.
Yeah, Juliana, I think we will never forget these times. So it's easy to remember, looking back to January when the outbreak started at that time in China first. We of course were all about helping our employees in China, our operations in China, to keep up and running as far as possible, making sure that our employees are safe there. We also helped our customers in China, for example, by sending them protective equipment like face masks, which where they struggled with at the time in China. So that was the beginning of the pandemic, and then very quickly, as you know, the spread hit the world, Europe and the US. So we had to make sure, similar like Uwe said, that first of all our employees are safe, and then we have operating model in place to make sure that we keep our supply up and running. Uwe mentioned that it's very important in our business that we supply the critical materials which are used in the manufacturing of drugs, not only vaccines, but there are other many life-saving medicines which require materials be supplied. So that was our priority, to make sure that the business continuity is given, that we manage thousands of our suppliers as well, that we help some of them to get through the crisis, through the lockdowns. And then as a next step, very quickly, Juliana, we saw that and we decided that we have to increase our manufacturing capacities significantly to be prepared for the increased demand from our clients. First, what we have seen at that time in February, March, April, many customers started order our products and build stocks to mitigate risk, supply risks. So we had to deal with that. So the first wave of capacity increase was consumed by this pulling forward orders from our customers. And then very quickly we also seen then the COVID customers who started to develop the vaccine and started to manufacture first clinical materials, that demand for our tools and materials increased significantly, or started to increase significantly in the second quarter of that year. So it was very, very tough time. It's still very tough and busy times for us again to secure the business continuity and the supply of our tools to this critical manufacturing today.
Thanks for sharing. Seems like it was a period where you had very little sleep, I'm guessing, in your team. And moving on to Uwe, how was quarter one like for you? I'm sure you faced many of the same issues as René did in Sartorius.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we were about to deliver on our budget like anybody else in all industries. And then we watched TV and we saw the pictures in Wuhan. And I know Wuhan very well. I was at this institute there. And I knew that they are very specialized and they will be able and capable to help because they work according to the highest standards. And while watching TV, we thought, well, that could become another SARS or MERS. And of course, lethality rates are shocking. And then in addition, we as Lonza, we witnessed it from not from the distance, but intimately, because we operate sites globally, everywhere, in China and Singapore. We had a case then in Singapore that we had to isolate, and then immediately we implemented a traffic light system for all the sites that we are operating in our manufacturing network. And so fast forward, and long story short, we really managed to keep most of the critical aspects in green all the time. And that in itself is already a big achievement. And then I remember just anecdotally, I received a call from incidentally from Sartorius, and they said we need isopropanol. And so then you see how far this goes, such a problem when it hits. And we, of course, we are making isopropanol. We are also making petrochemicals in our biggest facility in Fisk. But we could also not deliver so easily. But it tells you a story as to what needs to be fixed and to what level you need to fix it. And of course, also to the N-1, 2, 3 in your own supply chain to be able to deliver on the basics, not just any sophisticated stuff.
Sounds like a real journey, and I will be asking you later about what you would have perhaps done differently, now that we know how things have progressed. But on to Carlos, of course. So, what was the HZI Center doing, and how has it changed so far since then?
Okay, I think that at the beginning was more or less like for all of us, we were, let's say, shocked by the dimension of the event that we were facing. We need to start an hygiene concept that allow us to operate under more or less normal conditions. We need to devise plans in order to the risk if in terms of risk management we go under condition of high-end containment. We need to understand how we can shut down part of our activities if we need to minimize the personnel that is coming to the institute. This, of course, requires a lot of time. We need, of course, to develop a concept for our employees that were at risk themselves because of different comorbidities or age, and start some kind of clever use of home office. But of course, this is a training exercise. We have containment facilities, but of course, not everybody is trained to work in a level 3 containment facility with spacesuits, and this is a process that cannot be started from today to tomorrow. After a theoretical background, people need to be working with the body under supervision for a certain number of weeks before this person is entitled to work alone. And the number of operators that can train other operators are limited. And of course, this took a considerable amount of time and effort. On the other hand, we need to decide where we can make more impact or difference in terms of refocusing our activities, do this refocusing process. And scientists were extremely generous because they were, for example, offering personnel to other principal investigators that were doing COVID-related research and supporting these activities that sound probably trivial, but you need to have the virus, you need to cultivate the virus. If you want to do some kind of a screening or you want to do some kind of challenge studies, you need to have your virus stock, and this requires time and technology that need to be established from scratch. And at the personal level, I was running as a coordinator a large consortia that was focusing in Chagas disease, a tropical neglected disease, and I was supposed to start in April a big, large consortia between the European Union and India, 20 million euro project on next generation influenza vaccine, how you can start a new big project in the context of a pandemic. Okay, we started a bit later in August, but again, it's a challenge. There are activities of harmonization. There are something like 8, 9 trials that should be running in this project. There are activities of transfer of technology that in the context of restriction in mobility represent a major challenge. So I think that people were instrumental in the sense of providing help, support, and also this mental flexibility in terms of doing things in a different manner, but in the right manner.
All right, thanks, Carlos. Seems like there's a diversity of activities going on, but I also presume that many of your projects had to stop, like you mentioned, the other one that you had with India. So, well, it seems to us that all of us are doing the best we can to accelerate the development and manufacturing of at least one to a handful of vaccines, but clearly that there are still some urgent innovations that we need right now, that the situation is not perfect. And I would like to ask, especially Uwe and Renee, on what do we need to make and innovate in the manufacturing and development space that can help us to get to a vaccine sooner? I'll start with Renee on this. What else do we need to do right now to get this done faster? I think everyone is asking the same question as me.
Yeah, Juliana, when talking about right now, first of all, I would say we have to utilize or use innovations which we have in hands today. And give you an example, single-use technologies. This is something which, if we would look back 10 years ago, probably we would not have that innovation ready at that scale as today, which absolutely helps to build manufacturing capacities for the vaccines quickly today. When talking about single-use technologies, this is, imagine everything in the manufacturing which is in contact with the vaccine, with the product, is made out of plastic, is used just once. That helps customers to avoid any cleaning. It helps customers to build manufacturing facility much faster, saving a year or even more than a year to build a manufacturing process. And also, it's something which is very flexible, meaning if you build such a facility, let's say in the US, you can copy paste very quickly that manufacturing process either in Europe, in Asia as well. So I think that's one innovation which we have in our hands today, and many contract manufacturers are utilizing and building upon today, like Lonza and others, and using that benefit of the speed such an innovation brings today. Maybe second one would be I would mention is automation. Automation not only in the manufacturing, but also when customers develop a manufacturing process, they have to run a large number of experiments to figure out what are the right process parameters, how the process can impact quality of the product, to optimize the yield of a vaccine. So very important work which needs to be done and takes a lot of time. And there are tools also now, very innovative tools, which allow for very high throughput, automated way to run such experiments. And last but not least, I would also like to mention digitization or the use of data. That's something which there are tools available also today where you can real time perform data analysis out of your process to predict and change your process before something goes wrong, and you may avoid by that a loss of a vaccine batch, which of course nobody want to have that situation today. So there is a number of innovations we have in our hands, Juliana, today. We can use to really speed up the development of the vaccines, the processes, and also building up the manufacturing.
Well, thanks for sharing, Renee. I think just hearing you talk about real-time data monitoring, high throughput automation, I think that's really innovative and would definitely benefit us even beyond the pandemic and help us deal with future pandemics, hopefully not as severe as this one. Next, Uwe, how about yourself? Please share with us how Lonza is reacting to the pandemic, and maybe if you could tell us some of the innovations that you hope to achieve, having learned how you responded to this pandemic right now, and that you wish that Lonza could achieve in the next in the future.
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to turn the question around after half a year of breathtaking vaccine development, I would rather ask how can we apply it, learn from it, and implement it elsewhere, also in the therapeutic space, because vaccine development was almost neglected, and this development now from a stepchild to a pacemaker of innovation and new technology is fantastic. And of course, the pharma industry as a whole is quite slow, and that is because we cannot cut corners and compromise the efficacy and safety of our products. But this has also been for too long used as an excuse not to innovate. And from gene to IND, the mantra was, it takes 1 or 2 years to make clinical material from the DNA becoming available for a new drug. And this is now being challenged. And in the vaccine industry, if I remember well, the Moderna example, which I obviously know best, after the Chinese authorities shared the sequence of the new coronavirus on January 11th, it took them 42 days to ship the first clinical batch to the NIH after completion of the analytical release testing even. So if we take this as a standard, that, and of course, I don't want to compare apples with pears, but if we apply that to therapeutics, then of course, the critical path is different. And we can learn a lot there. And by the way, this challenge is also not coming from the established players in the vaccine field. It comes from outside. It comes from companies that don't even have a biochemical background, but a data science background. So to what René said, if we really apply all the know-how from machine learning, from artificial intelligence, and so on, and it's again not a coincidence that the new challengers and the disruptors are Tesla and Baidu and companies outside biopharma. But if we take advantage of these new insights from bioinformatics and so on, then we can also learn in the therapeutics field. And maybe just one example how we apply the new technology that René was referring to. You know that we are currently setting up the large-scale manufacturing sites for vaccine manufacturing, and already today, without the equipment being on site, we can train our specialists with the help of virtual reality. So the specialists are being trained as we speak, although they are sitting in a training center or maybe at home, and they can almost real-time experience pipetting under a clean hood. And then, of course, when the equipment is there, it will be double-checked and retrained again. But of course, we save months by approaching it that way.
I particularly like the part about training people remotely via virtual reality, because as you can imagine, all of us are now working from home or remotely, and just a thought that you can train your staff using VR, that's actually an excellent innovation. So thank you for sharing on that, Ua. So I'm just going to go to my next question. And before I do so, I just want to invite the audience with us today to drop us some questions in the Q&A function. Please don't be shy. We are with 3 experts in the COVID vaccine development who can tell us what they know about it. So as we wait for some questions, I've already seen a few come in. I'm going to ask you a very important one, and this is about the reality of getting a vaccine. So most of us are focused on how far the vaccines have gone in clinical trials. Are they phase 1? Are they phase 2? Are they enrolled in phase 3, etc.? But let's fast forward to a point where they do gain clinical approval. How then can we solve the issues of rapid large-scale vaccine production? So we've already got approval for a bunch of vaccines. How can we get them produced in large numbers? And how can we solve the issue of affordable pricing for the developing world? I know this is a difficult question, so I'm just going to open it up to the floor to see if any one of you wants to take it.
Maybe I can start, Juliana. Again,
Thanks,
when
Rene.
from the capacity perspective, making sure there is enough manufacturing capacity to develop the billions of doses which will be required. I think the time will not allow to build very large scale facilities which will be able to absorb that demand. So we will rather see, and we're seeing that today already, we will rather see what we call scale out, meaning I mentioned that before, kind of copy paste of small flexible facilities around the world. We're seeing that already today. Talking about one single vaccine candidate, we are at Sartorius working with 10 different manufacturers which are all over the world to build capacities at the same time. So I think that's one important aspect we need to understand is the what options do we have to build capacities fast, and that this is one option. And I mentioned that innovation of single-use manufacturing, which really helps us now today to get to these capacities quickly.
I would like also to piggyback into this discussion, and I think that I'm cautiously optimistic. We are going to see new vaccine coming, probably more realistic in the first part of 2021. And during this year, we are going to have more vaccines approved, manufactured, and coming. The key issue would be to understand which one of these vaccines is the optimal vaccine depending on the particular subpopulation group that is under consideration. There are certain evidence from the trials that show us, for example, that the antibody responses for different candidates can be basically ranging 100 times. We have no clue, and this is a gap of knowledge, which contribution could have cellular-mediated immunity in protection. The reality is that some of the new technologies are very efficient in promoting this kind of cell-mediated immunity that can also protect beyond the specific neutralizing activity of antibodies. We are also seeing that there are a real difference in terms of the reactogenicity of the different vaccines. They are not causing severe adverse events, and this is extremely good, but some of the vaccines are showing some adverse event in, let's say, less than 20% of the vaccinees. For other vaccines, it's over 50 or 75% of the vaccinees. So then, depending on the individual that you would like to protect, if the two vaccines have exactly the same efficacy, you would need to understand if somebody is very fragile due to disease or age, if this vaccine that is more reactogenic is the right one. So this is something that we need to learn, and also need to learn about the efficacy studies that are in place. We need to consider that some of these studies are very highly powered. We have 30,000 individuals that are receiving the vaccine. That means that with approximately a 95% confidence, we can rule out events that are happening in 1 out of 10,000 vaccinees. And this is very important. For other, probably the numbers are smaller, so we need to be more cautious. And in any case, we will not be able to understand what happened in terms of delay adverse events or very rare adverse events. So all these vaccines need to be rolled out together with pharmacovigilance processes that allow us to understand very early there's something that happened that probably might be of risk for vaccinees or certain group of population of individuals. I think that this is the key issue. The other thing, we need to develop also the technologies that allow us to fill potential gaps. For example, try to get a good local immune response in the lungs so that we are not only blocking the infection, we are also promoting a very potent effect in terms of preventing horizontal transmission of the virus. These are some of the aspects that I think need to be addressed in the coming months. But we are going to see let's say, 2-year process in terms of coming vaccines, manufacturing. Then there are different concepts for different vaccines. Some of the potential producers are talking about large number of doses. Other minor players are talking about the production of 30 million doses per year. The important aspect that we need to consider when we are talking about vaccine and vaccination is that by and large, all the candidates that are at the moment on phase 1, and we are talking about 45 vaccines, are based with one exception on 2 doses. That means that if I have 100 millions of doses manufactured, I can vaccinate only 50 million of individuals. Over.
Wow, Carlos, that was very helpful because one thing that you made clear was that we often think of having one vaccine cross to the other side, to the finish line, but you cautioned us that we might need many vaccines to choose from based on the individual and their needs. And also I forget now that some of these are multi-dose vaccines. So just saying you have 50 million doses could actually mean only half the number of people getting dosed eventually. So I've have a number of questions that have come into the chat. By the way, please keep the questions flowing if you're joining us today from any part of the world. Welcome. I'm just going to read out one question, which is actually similar to the one that I asked about access and pricing. This person asked, and any speaker is welcome to answer this. Once a vaccine is now available, how long do you think we would need for sufficient immunization so that public life can continue normally without restrictions again? So I think they're asking the realistic time frame between, say, FDA approval or phase three success, and them actually getting the injection and continuing their life as per normal. Are we talking about months or years? I guess it differs if you're in Singapore, maybe, versus Germany. Anyone want to wager a guess? I think it's a function of also the supply chain, etc.
Well, I think to answer this question, you need a good epidemiologist
Yes.
who tells you about herd immunity and what it takes. And then there's the relationship to the other coronaviruses that may provide some background immunity and so on. So, and that's, I know, not an answer to your question, but I think in order to be prepared to any scenario, we need to bet on the vaccine horse, and we need to make sure that despite all the answers or the questions that Carlos brought and that cannot be answered anytime soon, we have to make sure we manage this effort that has never been done before, and that is making billions of doses of vaccines, of various vaccines, because we don't know which one works for which population and if or when it gets approved and so on. But maybe in response still to the manufacturing question, there's also good news. And the good news is that for scale-up and mass production, we can apply principles and platforms that we master in other areas. And especially in case of the more synthetic vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, which is a totally new modality, but it can be produced almost cell-free and synthetically. And of course, once something is set up in a almost chemical synthetic cell-free way, then of course it can be mass produced quite soon. And so back to the question, which again, I'm not even sure, maybe Carlos, you can answer it. But since we know that even people that have been infected may need the vaccination afterwards to have a complete immune response, and at least an immunity for a certain amount of time. I don't think we need to answer this question and still have to move on with warp speed, as we know.
Thank you.
I want to comment on that. I think that in terms of providing access to the vaccine, there are initiatives in place that are already doing their best to guarantee that. Like, for example, COVAX with the WHO, with CEPI, with Gavi. The European Union has already talked about 500 million doses of vaccine for developing countries. I'm confident that we are going to bring vaccines even beyond those that can afford to pay for that. The companies are also doing their best. AstraZeneca was publicly disclosing that they are going to provide vaccine during the pandemic by and large at cost. This is, let's say, a grain, much more than a corn of sand in the ocean. On the other hand, I think that we learn a lot about the virus. We know who is at risk. These are individuals that are over 60, that have comorbidities, often more than once. These are the individuals that we need to protect. The risk for severe infection in individuals below 60 is 30 times lower than in those that are over 60. So this means that we can think in creative ways to protect those that represent the problem. Because the problem in COVID are not infections that are oligo or asymptomatic. The problem in COVID are the severe infections that basically clamp our capacity to react because they are overbooking what we have in terms of facilities for intensive care. So if we are able to protect the all, if we are able to introduce a vaccine or therapeutic antibodies, protecting those that are at risk, as well as those that are basically running our critical infrastructure, not only hospital, but also, for example, police, firemen, the personnel that is in homes for older people. And if we are able to protect this individual from contact with infected individual, but it's not so simple because you need to ensure that somebody that is protected is also in contact with the social network. If you leave somebody that is fragile over 80 alone, this person will deteriorate very rapidly. But I think that if we protect those that are at risk, we prevent that this is queuing in the healthcare system. For example, having visit at home in order to make sure that cases, symptomatic cases of COVID are treated very rapidly and are only going to the hospital when they need to go to the hospital. We can achieve a hell of a lot. The other thing that I need also to say, we have a lot of innovative technologies that allow to do a lot. And this is something that had a huge potential, but we need to keep in mind that these technologies are new. So surprises might happen. And this is very important if we are considering, for example, vaccination for children. Children need to receive only vaccines that are outweighing risk. Is a very important issue. The vaccines that are going in children should be 100% safe. This is a matter of ethic and is also a matter of practicality, because if something happens, the burden for the individual and the society will be running for 70 or 80 years. So we need to be extremely careful. And at the moment, there are no clear indications that they are the drivers of the pandemic. They are, of course, a vaccine that goes into a child will be a vaccine that will not receive a high-risk group. And we need to keep in mind this cost-risk benefit that for a prophylactic intervention like vaccine should be a must. First, we should not cause more damage. And this is my take-home message. We have many vaccines, more will be coming. We have not only the 45 vaccine in clinical development, we have 156 candidates that are under preclinical development. We need to understand very clearly which vaccine is the best for a specific application, not going at the level like in cancer of a personalized intervention at individual, but at population group.
Thank you, Carlos. I think it was very helpful to that you clarified that sometimes access is not necessarily of the whole population, but maybe we could triage the doses to people who need it the most, such as the, first responders, those in the front lines, and of course, very vulnerable populations. Well, we have many questions coming in. I'm just going to choose ones that I think are neat. One of them that I want to take is the one on artificial intelligence, AI. I remember Renee first mentioning it. So this question goes, AI, or artificial intelligence, will certainly play a role in optimizing the production in the future. How do companies then approach the certifiability and the assurability of these AIs? Feel free to respond, Uwe, as well, if you involve AI in your manufacturing processes. Does Renee want to take the question on how do you certify and assure the AI technology is good?
I would say AI is not the only tool which helps here. It's one of the tools, and it goes already down when researchers start to develop a drug where such a tool can be used. When talking about manufacturing, and especially development of the manufacturing processes, one aspect is we're talking here about biological systems where a cell is is kind of a manufacturing facility for a protein or for different modalities, and it's still rather a challenge to really understand the behavior of cells, to optimize the cells in a way that they produce preferably the target protein, but less all other proteins, whole cell proteins, other contaminants which need to be removed later in the manufacturing processes. So tools like artificial intelligence, or we're talking about mechanistic modeling, where we try to describe this the behavior of cell by mathematical model, and by that better understand what a cell will need, which feeds will need, how long it should be in a bioreactor, what temperature, what other parameters or combination of parameters a cell needs to perform perfectly when manufacturing a drug. So these all are tools which or challenges which are not yet solved, and tools like AI, mechanistic modeling, statistical tools, statistical data analysis, all in combination, we believe will bring a lot of insights in these challenges we still have today.
I
Well,
would
thank
like
you,
to add
Renee.
something in terms of artificial intelligence, not certification, but what we are using or extracting from artificial intelligence. Not every individual, even in an age group, is responding to vaccine in the same manner. And it's important to understand why you have good responders and bad responders, because if you understand the mechanisms that are behind, you can develop novel vaccines that are acting in this group of the population that have poor responsive for vaccination. You can also imagine that you are evolving diagnostic that allow you to make a screening, selection, and prioritization of candidates for different vaccines, depending on their capacity to react and mount a protective immune response. And this is something that we are using in different projects. For example, to understand responsiveness to influenza vaccination in the elderly is what we have as a core component, together with all the omics and big data approaches for collecting a fingerprint of the different individuals in this influenza vaccine project funded by the European Community. The other thing is our approach is to optimize antigens involved also in silico approaches. We are trying to look at some kind of artificial gene structure that is not common to any of the strains that you might be seeing, but is able to promote immune responses against all of them. This kind of technology, of course, are coming, are being implemented, and sometimes we are getting them from other fields. But this is the very important thing, no?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Carlos, on that. We have come to the end of our time allotted to us for our Falling Walls Circle Table discussion on COVID-19 trends in vaccine research. Um, Let me just summarize some of the things that we discussed. I thought we had a terrific discussions on innovations that are still needed, and one of them is training people in using virtual reality, using artificial intelligence to see how to improve the processes. We even discuss policy issues like who we should vaccinate, how do we get doses to where they are needed, and how to ensure equitable access of vaccines to everyone. And certainly, at the end of the day, we need to build capacity to develop the vaccines more quickly and to make sure that we can produce them at scale. And joining us today are three experts who have shared with me what they know and what their companies, Sartorius, Lonza, and HZI, are working on. So I want to thank all three of you for taking the time to participate in this session. Um, and I also want to thank all the audiences for joining us today, wherever you may be around the world. Thank you for joining us virtually in Berlin. Last but not least, I want to thank Falling Walls Foundation and Berlin Science Week for having us. In case you might be interested to continue with us, the next Falling Walls Circle Table will take place today at 4 p.m. And it is called The Next Big Machine. Does CERN need another super collider? So all of our talks are available at fallingwalls.com, falling-walls.com. Please check out our website and see the entire program featuring over 200 individual events. So once again, I want to thank my three panelists for your time. Thank you, Renee, Uwe, and Carlos. Thank you.